everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from December 1st, 2023. I'm recording this on May 29th, 2024. As always, I give you those dates so you know when this information is actually most relevant because the market is always moving and changing. So, as we will see by the differences in prices from just 6 months ago on some of these books. Also, as always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. I know I give the same intro every week. You guys are like, oh, geez, mix it up. But I feel like it's important to just kind of lay out what we're doing here. So why do we do this? We look back and see what made these books hot 6 months ago. Why were people chasing them? Why were they jumping in value? And we see how they've performed in the market since. What factors made them hot back then, and did those factors last? Did the book come back to what it was previously? Did it continue to climb? If you've been following this list for any length of time, and we've been doing this for over 5 years at this point, you'll know that most of the time you're better off being patient, but not always. And there are certain factors that kind of go into that, well, you can see that give you an idea of what you should be patient on and what's okay to go on and chase. So, let's dig into this week's list. We have 18 books, I believe, to talk about this week. So first up, we got The Boys, number 1. It was hitting the list again because we got an announcement of another spinoff. So we've gotten the Generation V spinoff from The Boys show, and supposedly we're going to get basically a Boys Mexico, I think was going to be the next one. At least that was the announcement back then. Raw copies were going for $100, 9.8, $350 to $429. Now raw copies $65 to $100, 9.8, $350 to $450. So we're gonna call this one a steady and an I'll be back. Basically the same range here, maybe a slight step back on the raw side, but overall this book has been very steady and has been pretty much, I want to say, since about season 2. I think it's been fairly steady. It kind of had a big jump on season 1. It kind of fallen back. Then season 2 came out. It kind of got back to where it is now pretty much. And it's pretty much just kind of sat here in this range for the last couple of years. Next, we have Sandman, number 1 from 1989. This is hitting the list for a couple of reasons. There was a 35th anniversary thing that kind of that was going around, and then also season 2 was announced to be in production. So that was what was why this was hitting the list back then. Raw copies were going for $150, 9.8, $550 to $700 on this one. Now it's a $60 to $120 book, $425 to the $550. So definitely an I'll be back borderline trap on this one. It's taken some significant steps back, despite, the other Dead Boy Detective series that's kind of related to this being getting a pretty good review. My guess is it'll kind of pop back up when season 2 comes out. But for now, you can definitely find a better deal than you could a few months ago. With that, we'll move into our covers. We only had 2 covers this week. We had a lot of DC and MCU stuff. But our first of our 2 covers is X-Men Blue Origins, number 1, the EM Gist 1 in 50. So this Mystique cover, this is the 1 in 50, so it's the Virgin version. There is also a trade dress version, which probably is affecting what we see here in just a second. Raw copies back then for this 1 in 50, though, we're going for $100 to $175, which is a really good sign for a 1 in 50. At that point, it's basically double, going all the way up to triple ratio. That's usually a pretty good sign. But not in this case. It is now a $20 to $35 book. This is a massive dumpster fire. It's barely going for more than the trade dress version, about double the trade dress version at this point. And that is something we have seen, though, quite often, is these 1 in 50, 1 in 100s that are virgin versions of a easily available trade dress tend not to hold as well as a true 1 in 50, 1 in 100 that is unique. That is just the way the market tends to work. Now, this is a very dramatic example, but generally, they do underperform compared to unique 1 in 50s, 1 in 100s. The virgin versions do not usually hold up as well. Next, we have Miles Morales, Spider-Man, number 12, the David Baldeón 1 in 25. This one was going for $35, $40 back then, which usually means it's going to be, so just between ratio and double ratio, which usually means it's going to be right around ratio or below. This one's actually just kind of held steady. It's a $25 to $55 book, but most of the sales are in that 30-40ish kind of range. 9.8 will cost you $70 to $100. So this is going to be a steady, and I'll be back. You can definitely find a few deals here, but it did not back up like you would typically see with a 1 in 25 that only got this high. It basically just kind of sat where it was at. So, all right, with that, we got a couple of Comic Buzz books. First up, we have Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, #1. This is hitting the list for the second time, about a month, not quite a month after it hit the list the first time. This is when issue 2 was coming out, as well as the second print was announced. So this is why this was hitting the list for a second time. At this point, it was still only a $10 to $25 book. Raw copies are now going for $40 to $70, and 9.8 is $75 to $150. So raw copies are almost as much as some of the cheap 9.8s you can steal. But overall, this is a up and a straight cash book compared to what it was back here when it hit the list just for the second time. Now it goes on to hit the list like 3 more times, I think, over the next month or so. We'll be talking about this. I don't remember exactly how high it got, but it'll be interesting to see, what the arc of this book is. We'll be able to follow it here for a while. Next, we have G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, #1, the first G.I. Joe comic, obviously, and this was hitting the list because of the Energon universe, and this was about the time we were getting announcements for several of the G.I. Joe series that were coming. Back then, raw copies were $280, 9.8, $860, a newsstand 9.8, $1,300. Now it's a $60 to $250 book raw, 9.8, $750. Compared to that $860 back then. Newsstand still $1,200 to $1,400, so their newsstand 9.8s are still basically in that same range. But overall, this is a down, and I'll be back. There was a lot of energy and buzz around this Energon universe back in the fall and into the winter. But now it's not that there's not. People are still loving it. It's just calmed down a little bit. The book's kind of stepped back more to where it kind of usually sits in terms of price. Or that, we got 4 DC speculation books related to the new James Gunn movies. First up, we have Huntress, #1, the first appearance of Helena Bertinelli. This was a $15 book back then, but 9.8 jumped all the way up to $200. Now it's a $5 to $20 book, 9.8 right around $100. So it's definitely become a trap on that 9.8 side, pretty steady on the raw side. And this is just rumors that she would be part of, the DC universe going forward, that maybe in phase 2 we were going to get something with the Huntress. There's several rumors about Gotham and that they may do like Gotham City Sirens and other things. So Huntress was one of the characters people were specking on. Next, we have Hellblazer, #1, the first solo series for John Constantine. And this was hitting the list because we got rumors that the Keanu movie was back in production. I still stand by. I'll believe this when I see it, but once again, we had rumors that we were going to get a follow-up to the Keanu Constantine movie. Back then, raw copies were going for $70, 9.8 was going for $395. Now it's a $20 to $70 book, 9.8, $375 to $415. Overall, call it's down, and I'll be back. It's way more raw sales than 9.8 sales, but just a slight step back for this one. This book didn't take a huge step forward back then anyway, so it kind of just returned to about what it had been going for. Next, we have The Saga Swamp Thing, #37, the first appearance of John Constantine. Raw copies back then were hitting $300. They didn't put a 9.8 value, and apparently I didn't double check to see what it was. That's usually I do on a book like this. But I didn't back then. Now raw copies are $150 to $300, 9.8, $13 to $1,500. So overall, another down, and I'll be back. A book that's taken a very slight step back, kind of returned to what it normally is from that little bit of buzz we got back in the winter. All right, with that, we still got 8 books to talk about. One more DC book, and that is Action Comics number 544, first appearance of Luthor's war suit or his armor. And that is basically going for a $10 book back then, 9.8 going for $95, because rumors that we were going to get Luthor in this costume in the new James Gunn Superman movie. Now raw copies are $5 to $20, so basically, this has gotten this book attention that it didn't previously have. 9.8's $1 to $150, so we're going to call it steady worth it. You would borderline go up, but for the most part, raw copies are still right around $10, and there's just not enough 9.8 sales to justify saying up and worth it as opposed to steady and worth it, at least for me. All right, with that, we had one Sony Madam Web related book still hitting the list here 3 weeks into that trailer being out. And that was Marvel Superhero Secret Wars number 6, the first cameo appearance of Julia Carpenter. So we talked about her first full appearance the last 2 weeks in Secret Wars 7. This is Secret Wars 6. People were kind of chasing it. Basically a very similar price to what that other one was going for, $10 to $20 for raw copies. Now it's a $5 to $15 book, 9.8, 60 to 140. So we're down in and I'll be back. Not a big surprise there. All right, the rest of these are more just MCU rumors and speculation, some of which has been going on. We've been talking about for the last few weeks. First up, we have Nova number 1. First appearance of Richard Rider, Nova, and this is speculation that's been going on for about a decade. People keep thinking we're going to get a Nova standalone project. And people keep chasing this book. This book is still, even back then, at $25 to $100 for raw copies, 9.8 going for $800. The book was down from some previous heights. Interestingly, now it's a $30 to $140, 9.8, $840. We're going to call another steady and worth it. So it's, I think we're about around where the floor is on this book. It's really just an uptick of sales every so often because of news. But yeah, this book is just down from what it previously was when people were really chasing it based on spec. At this point, this is kind of just where this book sits. Next, we have Nth Man, number 11. The Dr. Candy Goodstroke, sounds like a Bond girl, not a Marvel character, turned into a surfer-like character in this issue. And this is this is all speculation that we were going to get a female surfer back then. This was kind of dumb, though. This was not even really a herald or related to Galactus in any way. Just, kind of an odd story where this happened. But anyway, people were chasing this book. They were paying $3 to $12. So, okay. I said back then, I was like, come on, man. Why are you even bothering? But now it's a $3 to $20 book. So there's still some people willing to pay quite a bit or a little more than they probably should for this, what should probably be a $1 book. But yeah, steady and worth it for this one. Even though we now know that there is going to be a female surfer, but it's not going to be this character. So next, we have Hercules, Twilight of the God, number 1. First appearance of Juno, another female surfer spec on the list for the second week in a row. Last week, it was like $10. Now it's a $20 to $30. By this point, it was a $20 to $30 book. Now it's a $5 to $15 book. A recent 9.8 sale, just one sale, but was $25 plus shipping. So yeah, down in a trap on this one. And again, we know we're getting a female surfer, but we also know that it's not Juno. So, all right, more female surfer spec. We got Fantastic Four 244. First appearance of Frankie Raye. First appearance of Frankie Raye as Nova. This is where she becomes Nova. Raw copies back then were $20 to $40, 9.8, $400 to $500. Now it's a $5 to $30 book, $350 to $400 on a 9.8. So it's down and I'll be back. This Frankie Raye book's been worth more than a lot of these others just in general. But yeah, this one's backing up, starting to back up as well. Next, we have Fantastic Four 164, the first appearance of Frankie Raye, which is what I tried to say a minute ago. This is where she actually appears. She doesn't become Nova till 244, but this is her first appearance, 5 to 20. Raw copies back then. Now raw copies are 5 to 30. No recent slab sales to really comment on. Interesting how much less her first appearance goes for than where she becomes Nova. But yeah, so steady and worth it, I guess. It's, it's still sitting in that same kind of low key range. All right, 2 books left. First up of these last 2, we have Avengers 186. Chthon cameo in this book. Plus, we get the reveal that Magneto might be Scarlet Witch's dad. But really, this is about Chthon appearing, who's kind of a demon character. And basically, this is spec for the Agatha show. That this is going to be kind of the villain or whatever in that show. Raw copies were going for $75 back then. 9.8 going for $320. Now it's a $5 to $25 book. 9.8, $200. People have kind of forgotten about this. People We're still getting the Agatha show, but it's been significantly delayed at this point, like a lot of Marvel projects. Yeah, so this is down in a dumpster fire. It is definitely not going for nearly what it was going 6 months ago. Still kind of a good book if you're interested in Scarlet Witch and that kind of stuff, but now would be a much better time to invest in this book than previously, for sure. And then our last book is Uncanny X-Men, number 221. First appearance of Sinister, and this was basically John Hamm said in an interview, hey, be interested in playing Mr. Sinister in a project. This book has been on and off the list 9 billion times. For the most part, the price really doesn't move that much. But yeah, it's always on the hot list, off the hot list, on the hot list. Raw copies back then were 75, 9.8, 285. Now with X-Men 97 just finishing it, it's setting at a $40 to $75 book raw, $240 to $300 for 9.8. So steady, I'll be back. There's definitely a few deals in there if you have been patient from 6 months ago, and even patient from the beginning of the animated series a few weeks ago. But yeah, this book is still going pretty strong, right in the range it typically sits at. So that is this week's list. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time. Later.